Sony have reportedly locked down advertising rights for GTA 6, with various reports and insider comments describing a second trailer for the game is going to be at this year's Game Awards, and that it will feature a PlayStation logo and then only PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 5 Pro at the end of the trailer. The idea is that obviously the game's still going to be on Xbox, but Sony want to double down on the idea of the association between GTA and PlayStation. And try and get the idea of the PS5 Pro alongside GTA 6, try and get that out there as much as possible. Because the PlayStation 5 Pro is expected to be unveiled imminently. It might be across September. There's rumors of a state of play or whatever. And then Sony would like to get on top of production as much as possible going into GTA 6's release next year, which is sure to dominate everything. That's going to be like some weird tornado gust that just blows everything sideways, and all that's left is a PlayStation 5 Pro and GTA 6 in the middle. But I guess we'll see. But however, I wanted to get the heart of this, and if you sift through all the reports that are, because there's a lot of write-ups on this, the idea of Sony doubling down on the marketing for GTA, it does come, the source for it is Colt Mag Eastwood, speaking on his XNC podcast. Colt Eastwood doesn't he has quite a spotty reputation when it comes to leak accuracy. However, these comments do come after various developers are reportedly not choosing to appear on Xbox anyway, due to low market share, with Forbes reporting that the PlayStation 5 is outselling Xbox 5-1 at the start of 2024. There's a lot to this, and I feel like this is just indicative of the wider perception of Xbox, especially up against PlayStation, and how... Well, I'll throw a few more things in here because I've got a lot of different developer stories here. But an ongoing thing is everything that's happening with Black Myth Wukong, which is an ongoing conversation around an Xbox edition existing at all, with a rumored PlayStation 5 exclusivity contract, somewhat backed by Microsoft themselves, saying that the lack of an Xbox version is, according to them, not due to platform limitations. We'll get back to this thing in a minute, but what do you think about the general state of just Sony being like, we'll have it?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? Like you said, the PlayStation 5 Pro is about to be announced. Knowing our luck, it'll be by the time we finish recording this podcast and hit upload.
We've summoned it.
We certainly have. And they need games to sell it. And I want them to reveal first-party games, but maybe they're just not ready. You know, they do have Wolverine coming next year that no doubt they will push heavily as being a PS5 Pro title. But getting at least some kind of marketing deal for GTA 6, I mean, that is incredibly coveted. We know how much money these third-party games can make for platform holders because they take a cut of sales off their platform, and just associating what is undoubtedly going to be the biggest game of next year with PlayStation is a move that Sony has repeated for the past 10 years or so now. I mean, when they became the market leader again with the PlayStation 4, they immediately got the rights to Call of Duty marketing until Microsoft literally bought Activision to get them back, right? So that really succeeded for them to the point where they were fighting over Microsoft getting the rights to Call of Duty in court because they just make so much money off these big games when they're being sold on their platforms. Like you said, if they're outselling things 5-1, that's a lot of copies that you can get for your console. And in this case, it's maybe sales of the PlayStation 5 Pro because you're highlighting that as a key game. The reason, even though I'm not, I don't really know the leaker in question, the reason why I am inclined to believe that they're even trying this is because they kind of did it with GTA 5 remastered. Like, if you remember when the PlayStation 5 was announced, one of the big games was GTA 5 coming to PlayStation 5 with an all-new version, and they managed to lock that down. I know that's a kind of different beast because that is a game that's already been out for years and years, but it's clear that there's some kind of relationship there, so it wouldn't shock me necessarily. It wouldn't even shock me with Rockstar either because these are companies and they are going to go to the company that has the biggest market share that they can sell the most copies on. And I don't think in this case, kind of like with Activision and Call of Duty back in the day, I don't think it's maybe even a case of who bets the biggest, though that is probably important still. But yeah, who's going to get the message out to the most amount of people? And in this case, it would be PlayStation.
Yeah, well, that's the fascinating part to me, is that it just speaks to this wider conversation on the viability of Xbox. And if you are a developer, you're a studio looking at, okay, where are my chips best placed? It just seems to be with PlayStation. Like, yes, Microsoft have a lot of money to spend. There was the $70 billion deal locking down Call of Duty, but it just hasn't resulted in tipping the scales that much on the console sales side, where the market share just is in PlayStation's favor. I mentioned Black Myth Wukong just as an ongoing thing. The idea being that there are various deals doing the rounds, whether it's advertising deals or timed exclusivity windows or whatever. Like I said, the Black Myth Wukong thing is an ongoing conversation. It's yet to be fully clarified. You've just got Microsoft saying that it's not due to platform limitations. But that in itself ties into the ongoing conversation around Xbox Series X and S twin feature support. If you want to have a game on Xbox Series X, you need to support the Series S as well. Baldur's Gate 3 infamously made that requirement buckle at the end of 2023, where the game missed its launch in tandem with the PlayStation 5, and they ended up sacrificing the Series S version to get it out. But as far as I know, that's the only time that's happened, because you have various developers saying that when you're making things for Xbox, they have to account for the Series S, and that largely that seems to suck. So you have Bossa Studios' Ian McClure referred to the Xbox Series S as an albatross around the neck of production, saying many developers have been sitting in meetings for the past year, desperately trying to get Series S launch requirements dropped. Stalker 2 developers GSC Game World recently took to Twitter to say the upcoming game will only support 25 frames per second, which was then updated because various teams within Xbox apparently got in touch with them to offer more optimization to get the frames per second above 30, I'd assume. But it seems like that's what it's going to be. We also had Giamma Games recently embroiled in calling out Xbox over a lack of help when it came to getting their game Anotria on Xbox at all. CEO Jackie Greco tweeted, "You can ask Xbox why they haven't answered us for 2 months. Obviously, they don't care about Anotria and they don't care about you, the fans. The context is open. The context is open a store page and submission. We've Xbox Series X and S versions ready, but we can't proceed with submissions and release. I spent a lot of money for porting and they decided to ignore us." This also led to Xbox getting in touch with the company after a few days of social media boosting. But I'm now saying it shouldn't take this weird online, shouting them out, putting them on blast. You shouldn't have to resort to that to try and get projects moving. And I do think that it's an indication of the various wings of Microsoft and Xbox struggling to work together. Given what happened with Redfall, that was an indication of just the fact that Phil Spencer said ostensibly said he had no idea the state of the game, and it was able to get to launch without that being clarified. We'll get back to some of the exclusivity stuff. By the general Xbox ecosystem, it doesn't come across that confidently to the consumer side, or if you're working within it, it seems like it's a bit of a mess to even get something on the platform in the first place.
I think, sometimes Xbox, for as much as they do have going for them, man, they just fall down in the places where it can matter the most, and it might blindside them, might come out of nowhere. But I think, how many times across the years have they just handed PlayStation a win that they did not need to hand them? They've just shot themselves in the foot by making a mistake, and PlayStation has reaped the rewards, going right back to the reveal of the Xbox One in 2013, allowing PlayStation to do that, viral game sharing video that everyone loved, and that really had nothing to do with how good the PlayStation 4 was. It was just how bad the Xbox One was being received back then. And you mentioned Baldur's Gate 3. That was a tipping point for me. Obviously, pretty much nobody, maybe outside of the diehard PC fans who had played it in early access, had any idea just how big Baldur's Gate 3 would become. But in having this issue with the Series S and X parity and seemingly not being able to help in time, at the end of last year, Microsoft accidentally handed PlayStation the biggest exclusive of the year that wasn't supposed to be an exclusive, because everyone was hearing about Baldur's Gate 3. It was getting 10 out of 10s Game of the Year nods, and the only place you could play it on console was PlayStation, so they've just given them a win then. And I feel like they just keep doing this, and of course, you can say that nobody expects the likes of Black Myth or Baldur's to go as big as they did, but it's happened too many times for them to not be plugging that gap, I think, because you need to cover every single base when you're a company of this size, and the fact that they let stuff like this slip through the cracks is just completely crazy to me, and it doesn't help them. I want to like Xbox, I want to like the games they make, but come on.
That's the thing, and it's it is optics is everything. I think it goes hand in hand. You've got the optical side of things, the marketing side of things. Is it worth Rockstar, for example, bothering quote unquote with Xbox consoles on their marketing, because you have the market share, the literal reality of how many people own PS5s to Xbox being 5-1, and then you do have all the specific deals being made, different versions to have timed exclusivity windows or whatever. GTA 6 is going to be on Xbox, but that requirement of there being a Series S version, if I bring in that quote, for example, of just it being an albatross around the neck of development, are Rockstar, compromising something for the Xbox Series S version? I mean, assumedly there's not going to be last-gen versions, but that's still up in the air. I don't think we know if there's going to be PlayStation 4 or Xbox One versions of this, considering how long it's been in development. But to go back to the optics side of things, it's worth saying that Sony slightly locked down the ongoing Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy as that rolled out. There wasn't necessarily a whole song and dance around Xbox versions, but that was assumed to be multi-platform until the Xbox version of Remake just never materialized. And then Final Fantasy 16 was a PlayStation 5 exclusive, and then is now coming to PC, which is still Microsoft money. It's just that they don't, for whatever reason, make it work on the Xbox side. And I just think it's fascinating. I think where we're at with Xbox, like, I have a Series X. I love the thing. It's awesome. But it's just weird seeing so much corporate response to the consumer just nakedly not purchasing this system, and then the knock-on effect that has. Do you think we'll get a GTA 6 on Series S, or will they Baldur's Gate 3 it and just go Series X?
That is such a good question. I hadn't thought about that until right now. I think they might. I think they probably will try to get that to work, especially if there is some kind of like
they've had long enough to do it.
That's it. They've had long enough to do it. Something in the contract that they will get a Series S version. Maybe it'll be a case of you get an S version eventually. Maybe it's not there at launch. Maybe it comes further on down the line. I don't know if Microsoft would like that, but at the same time, if there's one company that can get away with cutting the S out, at least for a little bit, it's got to be Rockstar, right? Like Microsoft, they will, I imagine, will take every deal that is thrown their way to just make sure GTA 6 is on their machines at launch so they can get some of that pie, because they would be absolutely crazy not to. But it will be interesting to see if they have issues porting it over to the S and whether that impacts their relationship with Microsoft or Xbox sales. I'm in a funny position, right? Because like you, I've got both machines, and truthfully, this is the most I've ever played an Xbox console since the 360 days. I know that was only two generations ago, but as someone who's been with Xbox from the beginning, I'm really enjoying the games that I'm playing with my Series X. I'm playing Star Wars Outlaws now because the Series X and S has that Ubisoft Premium subscription. I've been playing Flintlock on it previously, like some cool Game Pass Day 1 releases. But I was talking to you on the wind-up on Monday, and I was saying, like, Call of Duty 6 is going to come to... Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is going to come to Game Pass, and I'm probably going to buy it on PlayStation. Like, I'm probably going to go there because, I don't know, I'm used to that ecosystem. I like the console better.
It's over, right? It's Jova. Like, if that's the mentality at all, then it is done. It's cooked, because if them spending $70 billion to turn heads in that direction still means people go, you know what, I'd rather just stick with the console that I like, then it's done.
Yeah.
Like, at that point, there was nothing left for you to do.
That's it. And I guess, what I would, the caveat to that is I think we're a very, arguably, I think, a small part of the market. People who own two consoles probably don't make up the biggest share of just console gamers generally. I don't know, I've never actually looked at the figures, but I have to imagine that the majority of people get a console and kind of stick with it, at least for the first few years. But as someone who has that choice, like, of course, I'm going to still play some games that are cross-gen on Xbox. I will play Indiana Jones on Game Pass when it drops there, for instance. But the biggies, the bankers, I'm probably going to play those on PlayStation because that's my primary system, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's also that thing about, does the average gamer have both consoles? I think the go-to is nearly always that they have a bigger console, PS5 and Xbox Series X, and then a Switch, as opposed to having two of the bigger ones, let's say. But it does make me think in regards to, spending the money on the bigger console. Say you only have a PlayStation 5 or a Series X, you might as well just spend the 70 and play Call of Duty on the console you already have, and chances are that's a PlayStation 5 anyway. Instead of forking out the money for a whole new console and Game Pass and assuming you'll be treated right going forward, because so far, historically, you have not been. So I just, it's not saying that 70 billion didn't go anywhere, but I don't know. I just don't think it tipped the scales as much as they needed.
Hey, I'm going to keep making this analogy until it just doesn't work anymore and everyone's sick and they're tweeting me saying, Josh, stop making this comparison. Scott Telford, I don't know if this means anything to you, but we're seeing this exact thing play out in football right now, my friend.
Okay.
There's a football club called Chelsea, right, which has been buying essentially every single player they can get their hands on, outspending the competition mostly, and just stacking their roster with players that they think are going to be like the next big thing, right? And despite spending all that money, despite locking down all of that talent, they're still not very good. They still lose games. They are still on a path that won't get them success for a good few years. And I can't help but see the comparison to Microsoft, a company that has spent so much money to acquire some of the best and biggest and most popular talent in the industry, and they're still getting outsold 5-1. I don't know. I think it makes it clear that like money in creative industries like this just can't solve anything. You have to have that. I'm not saying Phil Spencer doesn't necessarily, but you've got to have that like just ability to see what's gonna go big, the ability to kind of assess the markets in a way that isn't just ticking the boxes of what the market wants, but more importantly, predicting what they're going to like next and what's going to take off.
There's also, I mean, I haven't got the specific quotes from him, but recently there was an interview with Phil Spencer talking about how he passed on Destiny 1 and passed on Guitar Hero. Obviously, two massive franchises over the years, and it wasn't him, but it was Xbox that passed on GTA exclusivity for the PS2 back in the day, kind of thing. And so it is interesting, like the idea of just trying to read the terrain a little bit, where Phil Spencer, as an example, is meant to be someone who's a regular gamer. He does play a lot of video games. When all the Fallout stuff was happening, all the different court case stuff was happening, he was spotted just sitting playing Fallout 76. And it's like things like that, where it's like he's meant to be able to read this a little bit better than the average CEO. But it is interesting folding all of that together.
Listen, I couldn't do a better job, but you mentioned some of the games that they've turned down there. And to me, the biggest is Xbox not doing that deal with Marvel, when Marvel apparently went to them and said, look, we're kind of branching out. We want to make games. We want to make good games. And we want Marvel to be a major thing in this industry. And in the end, Sony got Insomniac, who was a second-party studio at the time, to make Spider-Man. And again, like I said earlier, Microsoft ended up just gifting them one of their now most valuable IPs, a game that came out and immediately sold 20 million copies. Like, I know now we look at that as such a Sony thing, like Sony now owns Insomniac, but there is literally no reason in my head that Microsoft couldn't have had that exact same Spider-Man Insomniac game. Like, Insomniac were free to work with whoever they wanted. They'd in fact just worked with Microsoft and Sunset Overdrive. They could have, it's not even like they would have had to go to a different studio or choose a different character maybe. It's like they could have had that exact game, that exact thing.
No,
and he said no.
I genuinely, obviously it's true, neither of us could do a better job than Phil Spencer. However, I don't think it's as hard as it comes across. And I think it does take examples of the quotes that I mentioned before, the developers who are in the thick of it, trying to get an answer from Xbox as to how to proceed with getting a game on the platform, or how to optimize something, or get a game over the finish line in regards to Baldur's Gate 3, where the apparatus is just a bit too big. The mixing of Microsoft gaming with Xbox, how small Xbox is in the wider Microsoft pool, and then just how messy a lot of that organizational side of things is. Like, you had, I'm sure it was Matt Booty, was internally they had to, they got rid of Hi-Fi Rush and these projects, these games and studios that they had in the works because they had too many projects to look after. And it's like, that's just dumb.
Yeah,
that's all just very, very dumb.